Turn on the radio. Find the radio, turn it on.
Secretly broadcasting to you from the remote outskirts of the Vegas Valley.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
We've hijacked your daily dose of regurgitated news to bring you the Dwight Lilly Show.
We think it's going to be bigger than American Idol.
Now, the man registered as one of the government's most wanted for speaking only the truth.
He gives good kids bad ideas.
The master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly.
I am talking to you.
Okay, Dwight Lilly here for your Tuesday night broadcast out of the high desert in southern Nevada, down here in the bunker. Boy, it's starting to warm up a little bit here. I don't know where you're living at, but we are almost 60 degrees today. So I can actually walk outside without icicles hanging from me. We're down to the last wire now for as far as this marathon presidential race that I think it started in 2008 when Barack Obama won the election and was inaugurated. I think we've been running for this. It's like I haven't, when it went, have they started lining up for 2020 yet? I'm not sure, but I'm sure that within the next month, we'll probably have some names being passed in front of us. You know, how they send the trial balloons out. What about me? What about me? And here, this new guy won't even be fitted into the Lincoln bedroom yet. I don't know what's going to, here we've got the thing with Russia, allegations that Russia interfered with the election. And it's, to me, I don't know about you, rest of you out here in America anyway. I know this show's going around the world, but to me, it's a little embarrassing. Even if another country does do some cyber sneaking around as far as your elections are going, we do the same thing. We've been doing it forever. We've interfered with elections all over the world. How do you think the Shah of Iran ever got put into place? My God, to sit out there and say, well, we don't have any problem. It's them. They caused Hillary to lose election. This is all really nothing but fluff. And my opinion on this is that the Democrats had everything going for them, and then they nominate somebody that was being investigated by the FBI. I mean, what? I don't understand. Maybe I just don't understand politics the way these people think politics. But to run a candidate, regardless of how qualified they are in your mind, that has all of these weak points out there that somebody can attack and tear down, and that's exactly what happened. The woman was flawed candidate. So here we are. They're talking about rioting in the streets. I hope that people's calm down here a little bit. I hope for the sake of the country, I hope for the sake of everybody in the world that we don't go now for 4 straight years of nothing but turmoil. But maybe we will. Maybe this is what our democracy needs. Maybe the entire swamp needs drained, not just Washington, but maybe our system needs drained. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Anyway, tonight, as my guest, I have Gleb Tsipursky. This guy has got more irons in the fire. One of the things that when I got the request for him to come on as a guest, I said, my God, listen to this. Author, speaker, consultant, coach, scholar, social entrepreneur, president of Intentional Insights, which is a nonprofit that empowers people to use science-based strategies to make effective decisions and reach their goals to build an altruistic and flourishing world. 10-year track professor at Ohio State University in history of behavioral sciences and the Decision Sciences Collaborative. And let's not forget here. Of course, I got to get this in here. He wrote a book that came out, I think, in the summer of 2016, Socialist Fund, Youth Consumption and State-Sponsored Popular Culture in the Soviet Union, 1945 to 1970. Gleb, are you there?
I am definitely here, Dwight, and it's a pleasure to be on the show. And thanks so much for your good words. I appreciate them. I really do.
Well, you're just, I mean, your mind, does it ever slow down?
Oh, only when I meditate.
I have to ask you about this study because I know that you got a background in history. In fact,
Mhm.
isn't that what your undergraduate studies were in history?
Yes, that's right. Yes, so I
Yeah.
studied history in undergraduate school, and I got a PhD in the history of behavioral science. So yes,
Why were you interested in the culture? Okay, the youth consumption and state-sponsored popular culture in the Soviet Union right after World War II up until 1970. Is that a particular period of I get well. I don't know anything about it myself because we were in a very deep Cold War with the Soviet Union. The
oh,
only thing, we had little of no information. What did you find interesting about that?
yeah. So great question. So something that was fascinating for me about the Soviet Union was that I grew up in the United States. Well, my background is that I came to the United States when I was a kid. My parents immigrated from the former Soviet Union in when I was 10, so in 1991. And I grew up in the United States. That's my home country. I'm a US citizen. But the Soviet Union represents the main alternative modernity to the United States. It was the other path that the world could have taken. Until the Soviet Union lost the Cold War, it didn't have to. In the imaginary alternative world, the whole world could have been socialist. And that would be scary, but it could have been the case.
Yeah.
So I was really wanted to understand what that country was like, how people made their decisions, how they lived their lives, and how they find a sense of meaning and purpose, what kind of emotions did they feel, what kind of communities did they engage with. And so that's what I studied, community cultural groups. So how people came together in community settings to be together with each other, sort of the equivalent to civic contexts in the United States, to clubs, to churches, to various sorts of cultural groups like that. So that was my topic of research.
So were you surprised at some of the findings you came out with?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So there were, it was a very binary, not a very, it was a very complex situation. And one of the really interesting things was that I was really shocked that people had a lot of fun in contexts that were sponsored by the state-sponsored clubs. I didn't expect this to be. I kind of thought that people would be really bored in in the cultural context of the state sponsored. But you know what? When I actually went over there to do research, and I did a lot of interviews with people who lived in the Soviet Union, now in post-Soviet Russia, I looked at government records and so on, and people really enjoyed it there. They had a really fun time. They got together, they had parties, they had music groups, they had sports groups, they had tourist groups, and they really enjoyed this stuff that the government was providing. And that was really shocking. It didn't really match my image of the Soviet Union, that people would be having fun in context provided by the government. So that's why I called the book Socialist Fun, that it's kind of getting at this contradiction, which is like sort of an oxymoron. Most people see socialism and fun as an oxymoronic kind of combination, something that doesn't fit together.
Right.
So yes, that was probably the most surprising finding.
Yeah, I lived through that era. I remember. Well, I wasn't born during World War II, but I mean, I lived through the 50s and 60s and 70s, and I think in America here, at least I hope so, people are finally starting to get the idea that propaganda is everywhere and state-sponsored propaganda. And I'll give an example. I believe I brought this up in a previous show, but I'll throw it out here again. Facebook and Twitter and all of the different um, social media outlets we have going on right now, there are thousands of United States government employees posing as people on those sites in order to spin public opinion in a certain way. It's going on everywhere you're at. And so the reason I bring that up is when we saw, and I'm talking about me growing up in a small town in the Pacific Northwest, state of Washington, when we saw the Soviet Union, just like as we saw the communist China, we saw people dressed in really drab wear, and nobody was smiling, and they would show funny looking cars, and they would show just. I don't even think they ever showed a picture of the Soviet Union, which is a huge. When it was all together, it was a huge plot of land. I don't think it ever sunshined there, Gleb. As far as you know what I mean, we always saw people with these heavy coats on, with these fur hats pulled down, and the snow is everywhere, and they're eating on a piece of bread, and having some cabbage, and I don't think it was that way at all.
No,
I mean, I think it was.
It really wasn't. And that's kind of very disappointing to find out for many of your listeners, I'm sure, that the United States government misrepresented reality. But it's definitely so. I mean, let's not kid around. The government definitely spins propaganda. Corporations definitely spin propaganda. And that happened very much. So images of the Soviet Union that were positive didn't make it our way. The government made it their job to make sure that it doesn't. So did Hollywood. So Hollywood and government research shows, kind of, there's a lot of evidence, and we can go in depth into this, of a number of studios, movie studios, working with the government, telling movie studios that they shouldn't show positive depictions of the Soviet Union and should only show negative depictions.
Exactly.
And they only exported outside of the United States. They only exported positive depictions of the United States. They didn't export films like Rebel Without a Cause or something like that with Marlon Brando, which shows the reality of gritty America and people rebelling against, the situation in the United States. They didn't export stuff like that. They exported stuff that showed the United States in a very positive light and was not really high quality, to be honest. So, yeah.
I met some people in Seattle. Oh God, this is back it was before the Soviet Union collapsed. So it was still under siege there, I guess you'd say, people-wise. They were people that had they had somehow snuck out of the country. I can't remember the exact story. I know the ones I talked to had come via Canada down into Seattle, and they were being put up by various groups there of, I guess you'd call them former Soviets or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
and so two of them, most of them couldn't speak English, and it was at a cultural exchange where there was ballet and music, folk music and all that, is where I met these people. And they said the most surprising thing that when they came here, is that everybody wasn't driving around in a Cadillac, and there weren't any cowboys and Indians that they could. And I looked at them. I says, "Cowboys and Indians," and they said, "Well, yeah, it's And I said, "Isn't that funny?" I says, "Well, I don't even know if there really were cowboys and Indians to begin with. I think that most of that was. I mean, I know there were, but it wasn't like." It's not a glamorized existence. If you take a look at what the United States was in the 19th century, it was not a pretty picture. People were, hard scrabble farmers, and barely making ends meet. The average lifespan, I believe, because in fact, I just was doing some research on this, was 33 years for a woman and 37 for a man. In the 19th century in the United States. A lot of, so it wasn't, but here these people from the Soviet Union, actually they were from the Ukraine, is that part, they were, we're just amazed. I says, no, we actually have to work for a living over here. And it's,
that speaks to the effectiveness of American propaganda. American propaganda was very effective, and we still have some quite effective American propaganda going right now. I mean, there's no question that this happens, and this has been reported. Now, however, American propaganda doesn't hold a light to Russian propaganda. So there's actually quite a bit of research done by a number of investigators, journalists, FBI, showing that Russia had very professional hacking of our elections. You were starting the show by talking about the Russia hacking the elections, and Russia not only hacked the elections, but it produced a lot of fake news for the elections. So you have folks who are Russian hired trolls going to various Facebook groups and spreading information critical of Hillary Clinton and favorable to Donald Trump, because Putin wanted Trump to win. Trump is on his side, so that's like a natural thing for him to do. And that's a very effective propaganda machine that Russia has built up. So very effective, very strong. So yeah, that's definitely the case. There's a lot of research showing that that's quite happening a lot. And that's a big problem for us, I think. I think we shouldn't make light of it. When we interfere with other people's elections, that's, we can say that that's bad, but that's interfering with their sovereignty, right? When people interfere with us, that's them attacking us. So if we attack them, it doesn't make it right for them to attack us.
Right. Well, the very first show I ever had on the radio here, I keep reminding people almost every show, so I'll say it again. Don't believe anything the government tells you. Don't believe anything the polls tell you. Don't believe anything the media tells you. Don't believe anything I tell you. Do your own research. Combine, go out and don't buy in to the, Fox News or CNN or that, because they're nothing but propaganda. One of the sites that I keep on because I have a lot of different alternative and mainstream news sites and research sites for my radio show, and then I have my website and I've got a lot of stuff that I put out, is Russia Today, and they have offices in Miami. Now, Russia Today, it's called something different, I think, over in Russia now, but it's a television channel. All at least in the United States, I believe it's English speaking in the United States, and they have. If you go to their website, they have lots of articles. They cover they cover everything, but it's going to be covered exactly opposite what, say, Fox News is covering it. They have stories that are, of, like you said, propaganda-based stories. I'm not saying the stories are untrue. This is a key, I think, Gleb, of propaganda. You don't tell an untrue story. It's how you present the fact. You embellish the facts that you want to embellish.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you get called on it, you say, I wasn't lying. That really did. Well, yeah, but you were looking at it from a totally biased. Well, okay. It's just amazing. But if you go to Russia Today, everybody out there, I tell everybody to have a pad and a pen with them on my show. Write that down. Go to Russia Today. Check out their website. It's a great, very professional website. The people you're going to see on there look like your normal, any other network around here. They've done a very good job of putting that together, and it's
they did a very good job. And this is a well-known site owned by the Russian government.
Yes.
So this is owned by the Russian government. So when you are evaluating the credibility of sites, you always want to know what their bias is and who owns them. Who owns them? The media will represent the voice of whoever owns the channel. So if the Russian government owns the media, which in the case of Russia Today is owned by the Russian government, it's also known as RT, Russian TV, Russia Today. It's owned by the Russian government. It will represent the voice of the Russian media. It will look very professional because that's what the Kremlin spends its money on, propaganda, spin. And it will be nicely done, high quality spin. But it will be spin and propaganda nonetheless. And I think, Dwight, you're absolutely right, that folks need to understand that spin is not obvious lies. It's not like the moon is made of green cheese lies.
Yeah, but what? To me, Gleb, what's scary is people like George Soros, who have so much money. They got enough money they could burn it, $100 bills every 5 minutes and never run out of money, and how they can control messaging. And I'm not saying they're the only one, but now we have these, like for instance, George Soros has an arrest warrant out for him in Russia. if he lands in Moscow, he gets hauled off and in leg irons because of his interference, I guess, in the Crimea and the Ukraine, down there in the Crimea, of him. I guess Russia has evidence of him doing serious interference in the affairs down there that caused a lot of people to lose their lives, which is unfortunate. But I don't think people like him or the Murdochs or any of these people really care. It's all about making money. It's always all about how can we make money off the misery of some other situation, capitalizing on it. And reason I'm bringing that up is because the people now that are protesting the election, they're scared. One of the things that I've noticed, because I'm very active politically here in Southern Nevada as an activist, and I was at a meeting today, a county council meeting, and I'm a registered Republican, and the chairman of the Democrat Party, and I'm friends with her and the secretary of that party, even though we don't agree upon a lot. But when we have conversations, it's amazing. And I finally got them to admit today that, we hope that, that this isn't a catastrophe that's going to go forward, because our country we can't make the changes we need to make a better country if everybody's at each other's throat for the next 4 years. And then,
I think that's so wise, Dwight. Yes, we certainly can't. And I think what you said earlier is also very wise, that we need to follow the money. So whenever somebody is saying something, whenever George, Soros is saying something, or Rupert Murdoch is saying something, we need to look at what are their financial interests. And, Donald Trump clearly has financial interests. This is why there's a scandal with him not selling his financial interests. Hillary Clinton has certain financial interests tied with the Clinton Foundation. We need to look at her, with the financial interests that she has there. We need to look at financial interests and see where people are saying things that would give them financial advantage, and not trust them. Not trust them on areas where they say things that would give them financial advantage.
And we try to get them to divest of all of their interests, but these people have been doing this for decades. They have so many friends, so many connections, and when they do set up a trust agreement, it's with a wink and a nod. They still control everything they're doing. Nobody gives up billions of dollars or hundreds or millions of dollars and doesn't keep their thumb on it, or they wouldn't have it when they come back out. It'd be taken away from them. So it's really amazing. But the corruption, I'm hoping that we get, and this is what I'm driving here locally, is that we get more back to a grassroots political effort where we don't need professional politicians running our country. We need Americans running our country with common sense. I'm going to have to take a break here. And when I come back after the break, we're going to get into another thing that this has really got me. It's called, it's a book, or I think it's an article. Anyway, we'll get into it right after the break.
You're listening to The Dwight Lilly Show. Dwight Lilly Show.
It is worldwide.
Where the truth survives and the lies are exposed.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Number one with a bullet.
I think that people are going to like this.
More with the master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly. Dwight Lilly. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network after this short break.
Within the ethers of reality, there sits a bridge, a hot spot between what we see and what we don't see.
Testing, can you hear me?
Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Join Becky Vickers on Bridging the Paranormal as she interviews paranormal investigators from around the world and explores how the shadows of the past meet the present.
Let's begin.
Bridging the Paranormal will take you to some of the most haunted places in the world in search of proof that the dead still walk among us.
I see dead people.
Becky Vickers' Southern charm will have you believing in the unbelievable.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Live Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern, Bridging the Paranormal. Bridging the Paranormal. Hosted by Becky Vickers. Paranormal talk about the dark side, but with a lighter side touch. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. It's time to believe. Believe in the unbelievable.
It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great.
Make a note of it.
It's great.
Where'd that shot come from? Alpha 3 to Eagle 1. We've got company.
From Tate Publishing, codename Eagle Force, the saga begins.
I see them, Alpha 3. All units stay low and let them come.
From the eyes of a special ops officer, Joe Michael Riggy brings to life this amazing story of survival, the unknown and the unexpected.
Here they come. Hold your fire. Hold. Now.
Codename Eagle Force at TatePublishing.com.
What if maintaining a healthy weight was as simple as drinking a cup of coffee? With Valentis coffee, it's that easy. Harvested from the world's most pristine coffee farms and packed with the purest ingredients on earth, Valentis takes losing weight to a completely new level. At Valentis, we believe everyone deserves a chance to be healthy and fit. It's pure, natural, healthy, and delicious. Click the Valentis Healthiest Coffee banner on the KCOR Digital Radio Network website and take the Weight Loss Guarantee Challenge. Valentis Coffee, simply the world's healthiest coffee.
Incoming message.
In a digital world infiltrated by government as well as civilian disinformation, a single, powerful, and researched voice speaks through the night.
We're getting a signal.
Join Erica Lukes, the host of UFO Classified, as she interviews some of the hottest, sometimes controversial, but always informative people in the world of ufology and the paranormal.
They knew for sure that it was an alien craft, and our governments around the world have covered it up.
The reason I was taken aboard was because there was no choice. I would have been dead.
UFO Classified, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, every Friday night. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there just waiting to be discovered. But the question is, are you ready for it? UFO Classified, hosted by Erica Lukes, the new voice of the high desert. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Receiving transmission. Commence radio program sequence. Channel check.
Left channel. Frequency check. Frequency check complete. All frequencies clear.
The KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number is open at 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Oh, sweet.
Tweet your comments anytime to KCOR using the hashtag KCOR. Join the conversation live and share your thoughts of the show in our chat room at www.kcorradio.com.
It's as simple as that.
Now, back to your constitutional freedom fighter.
Now you're putting the whole station in jeopardy.
The master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly.
Okay, Dwight Lilly back here with Gleb Tsipursky, and I couldn't find. I had a whole bunch of papers here, and they somehow got disappeared off my desk here. But anyway, I think I can sum it up. We were talking about this at the break. Gleb has put together a system where you can approach a debate, a discussion, where you could have two, diametrically opposed positions going on. And when I was taking high school debate class, I know we were trying to win the debate. Let's put it this way: if we could win the debate, and we had the best debate team at the school, then we got to go into tournaments, and then we got to, it was all about winning the debate. And I find that in government, in business, in all social interactions, whether you're married, got a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a husband, a wife, or you're in a club or whatever, you're going to have human interaction. You're going to have opposing sides, and you might be arguing for something. Isn't it more important? And this is where what Gleb's is, if I catching it right, what the strategy is it's not about winning. It's about having a conversation about finding jointly the truth. In other words, two sides coming together, and rather than getting the pitchforks and you know torches out and everything and trying to beat the other person down, it's like, wait a minute, if we can find where the truth is, you might have part of the truth, I might have part of the truth, or maybe neither one of us have the truth. Maybe the truth is something else altogether. Then if you actually possess what the truth is, you can address the problem solving. If you're just going to keep beating, and the problem is, and I related this in the break, if I'm a better debater than you, I'm more skillful, maybe a little more slick, and I beat you and win, that I won, that my position won, where my position's a lie, it isn't the truth, then everybody lost, because what goes forward is, well, that's, he had the right answer. No, I didn't have the right answer. I was able to sell the answer that I had. I didn't actually possess the truth. And so I'm going to bring Gleb back on here. I want you to explain this, Gleb, how you came about this process. You enter psychology and all. It's like we're all like test subjects or something like that. But tell me how you came about developing this, and where it's being used right now, and if you have it out in the industry. I want you to talk about this.
Sure, happy to do so. So the article is on glebtsipursky.com. It's called Collaborative Truth Seeking. So collaboration, truth-seeking. We often think of when we think of debates, the metaphor that we in our culture use is war, arguments as war. I beat you, I fight you, arguments as soldiers. I crushed him, I crushed her, I won the debate, I undermined his argument. And that's the problem, that we tend to think of arguments as war, conflicting opinions as war, and not as collaboration. And we tend to think about them as winning as opposed to seeking the truth. Now, there's a lot of research in evolutionary psychology showing that debates, when they got started, were an adaptation for human beings who lived in tribes to settle conflicts. And they weren't about essentially finding the truth, they were about winning. So debates are set up to win. Now, if you think back, if your listeners, if there were some jocks among your listeners, and if you think back to your school days and you see nerds who can outcompete you in an intellectual argument and you just want to beat them up, the nerd who was outcompeting you wasn't necessarily outcompeting you because he had a better answer, but he just happened to be more intelligent, and that's not a higher IQ, and that's not a judgment on you or on him. IQ, someone is stronger and someone has more high IQ, and that's fine. But the fact that someone has a more high IQ doesn't mean that that person is right. And like you said, Dwight, very wisely, people with a higher IQ and also with ability in marketing and selling can sell ideas, if they have debate club training, that aren't necessarily accurate at all. I bet, Dwight, that you can take one position and argue for it and convince an audience, and then you can take exactly the opposite position and argue for it and convince the audience much better than the average Joe on the street. So that's the debate skills. That doesn't have anything to do with truth. These are two different things. Now, if we want to go and actually figure out the truth, we need to engage in a collaborative conversation where we honor and respect each other's opinions and focus on avoiding triggering negative emotions. So here we go into emotional intelligence, human psychology. So a lot of clients with whom I work in business settings use this strategy as opposed to shouting at each other in business meetings, which is what previously happened. So they bring me in to help them address this sort of problem. And what we do is we sit at a business table and we talk in a way that respects the other person's emotions. The first thing to do, and the same thing in political settings, the first thing to do is avoid getting the other person defensive. So build up trust and rapport with the other person. Don't get that person defensive. Don't tell that person that, hey, you're wrong, shithead. That's a bad thing to tell someone. That's not the right way to approach any sort of problem with someone. You want to think about where that person is, what that person cares about, where that person's values are, and find out what motivates her or him to have the beliefs and opinions that he or she does, how he or she feels about those beliefs and opinions, and what you think and feel about your opinions and beliefs, where they came from, and then examine the sources of your evidence. So as we talked about just before the break, we often don't know where our ideas came from, where the knowledge came from. We want to investigate the evidence. So investigate where your interlocutors, where the person that you're speaking to, where his evidence came from, where your evidence came from, how you think and feel about it. And respecting that, then you can compare in a factual way what is more accurate, and then evaluate each piece of evidence as you go along. So don't want to take up the whole time with describing the method, but let me stop here and see what kind of thoughts and questions you have, Dwight.
Yeah, well, while I was listening to you, here's what I was thinking about. When I took marketing, I had a sales company. I had a company that we had manufactured housing. We had 3 different dealerships in the greater Seattle area. And I had a ton of salesmen and staff and everything. And when the factories that sold us the products, and I'm going back into the 70s, 1970s back then, they would come in and put on seminars on teaching people how to sell. And it was always how to scam people. I never felt comfortable. I'm going to tell you what, if you got in front of a good salesman in the 60s or 70s, they would take your money away from you. You would go home, and when you came out of the fuzz, you go, I didn't want to buy that vacuum cleaner. And then you'd be looking at your wife or you're looking at your husband. How come we bought that? You were don't feel bad about yourself if this happened to you, because these people were experts at psychology, about using different techniques that guide you right down to where your hand was moving and signing the contract. But a better way of approaching it, I went to a sales training institute in Bellevue, Washington for a year, a professional sales training course. I was doing it at nighttime. It was 3 nights a week after we closed the hour. I mean, my days were about 20 hours long, but I wanted to learn a different way of doing things. And what this was, it was more of a personal sales relationship where instead of, okay, let me give you an example. If I'm debating you, Gleb, now you're speaking and I'm not listening to you because I'm spending all of my thought energy on what I'm next going to say instead of listening to you. So in this new sales technique, it would be asking questions of the person designed to get what they wanted. You might not even have what they want, but if you could find out what they actually want and could match up the price point and everything else, there's a very good chance you just made yourself a friend for life, and they would buy from you because you solved. It's all about problem solving rather than sticking something, a orange vacuum cleaner on somebody that you're trying to get off the showroom. And it was a whole different. And Gleb, the reason I'm bringing it up is because in learning that and trying to get my salesmen to apply it, and I'm telling you, I never succeeded with the old timers. No, they were just stuck in their way. But the younger people that came on and embraced this, they were outselling everybody else because they were actually helping people rather than. So I was going to ask you, did you have trouble when you go out and are discussing this? And I assume you have, like, okay, let's sit down and practice what we're talking about. I bet it was the same problem I had. I don't know, maybe it wasn't, because you're probably dealing with younger people on a college situation, of getting them to stop thinking about what they're going to say and start listening to what the other person's position is. Did you have trouble getting this across to them that, listen, it's not about you winning, it's about finding the truth here?
Yeah, so great question. And I think your story is very illustrative, Dwight, that it's very hard to get old dogs to practice new tricks unless the dogs are really motivated. So I do this, with college students. I do this in a variety of political settings. I do this in a number of business settings with clients, my business clients. And what I tend to see as the thing that most often is the failure mode, where people fail, is not respecting other people's emotions and not respecting other people as human beings and not respecting their own emotions. So not respecting other people as human beings is the kind of mistake that you described, trying to sell and trying to win by selling. It's a short-term oriented perspective that will, for many people, they will win by that. If you are in a situation where you have what's called in a game theoretical perspective, one-off games, where you're only doing one sale for a person, you are strategically better off just trying to sell and take that person's money. Now, that might not be the ethical thing to do. That might not be the right thing to do, but that's the thing that you would want to do to maximize your money. However, if you want to build a long-term relationship and actually help the person do it in an ethical way, then you would do exactly what you're suggesting of trying to help solve that person's problems. If you solve, her problems, she will be a good customer for life, and she will be your friend for life because she will trust you. She will build up that rapport. So that's what you want to do if you want to have a good, healthy relationship with someone. So that's kind of one, respecting people as human beings. Second is respecting their emotions. So not calling them dumb, stupid, jerks, libtards, whatever, conservative bastards, whatever the word would be for equivalent word for conservatives, not calling them that. And not saying that, oh, you are wrong. Instead, it would be something like, oh, hey, I'm confused about this. Can you help clarify it for me? So using questioning, seeing where their beliefs come from, where their evidence comes from, and seeing whether their evidence is actually credible. So it all goes back to that evidence that you were talking about, Dwight. Where did they get their ideas? Where did they get their information? And you'll often find that there's, a paper tiger there. They actually don't have the evidence to back up their claims. They don't have the information. They don't have anything credible to back up their claims. And they will often end up changing their mind themselves. Or sometimes they will have evidence, and the evidence will be better than your evidence. And then you should change your mind to fit their belief, because the end goal is not to be right. What kind of a person just wants to be right? You want to be correct. You don't want to just be the right person. You want to be the correct person. You want to have the correct, accurate beliefs. And if somebody comes at you with a better argument, it's like somebody hands you a bigger gun. You want to have the bigger gun. And if the other person has the bigger gun and they give it to you as a free gift, you better take that free bigger gun. And now you have a better argument and you have better beliefs and you're more correct. So that's a really effective perspective to look at collaborative truth seeking, focusing on figuring out what is actually true rather than feeling like something is true.
Yeah, it's skills too. We develop how we interact with each other probably from the womb of our mother, listening to her argue with the grocer over the price of tomatoes or something, and then we're born and we listen to our family members, we see how they interact, and then we get into school and we see how, and we learn all these bad habits about dealing with people, and then we start getting competitive. I have to win.
Yeah.
Like in a classroom situation, some of the dumbest people I know had straight A's in school. They're the dumbest people I know. And I could never figure this out. And a guy told me one time, he said, well, you know what it is? Some people are just better at getting grades. They have figured out how to get a good grade
Mhm.
rather than actually learning the skills set that the class was all about. You know, how could a person come out of a class on history or something, and then if you were talking to them about something to do with history, because I know you're an expert on history, like say the Franco-American War or something like that, and then that you find out they didn't really know the cause of it, they didn't really know what the I'm just going off here, and you go, God, how did you get an A in that class? Well, I was very good at taking the test. I'm very good at memorizing dates and stuff, and not everybody's good at memorizing, spelling words or something. And I find it very interesting, the skill sets that we have to overcome if we're going to get there. Now, for the people listening out there, I know some of you probably your heads are spinning, but I want you to think. Don't think of this in business terms necessarily. Think what Gleb is talking about. What about you and your wife? Does your wife or does your husband say, "I don't want to talk to you"? Well, why not? Because you're just always right. In other words, they've been beaten down to a point where they don't have a relationship anymore because they always lose the argument. They don't have the skill set to beat the other person. Instead of the other person knowing that they're good at what they do, but instead of setting aside the skills and say, well, let me understand you. Why do you feel this way? That isn't what happens. The person that's winning, they've been used to winning, Gleb, their whole life by beating everybody else down.
And then they get surprised, and then they're surprised when their wife or husband divorces them. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Because nobody likes to feel beat down, and nobody likes to feel that way. And then that person ends up having very few friends, and they don't understand why. Because they're not really connecting with people. They're just beating them down, and they're being essentially, like I was talking about before, the nerd who was being an intellectual bully, kind of beating people down, not because he or she was right, but because they had better ways of arguing. And that's nothing, but that doesn't say anything about the truth of the argument. It doesn't say anything about the truth of what they were saying. I think you're very correct to point that out. It applies not only to politics. Politics is one big area, and we can, talk about that next. But it applies to business. So often, with businesses bring me in to consult on conflicts within businesses, and this is very frequent that business people just kind of shout at each other, and the one with the loudest voice wins, and that's really harmful in a business setting. Because then bad decisions get made and businesses lose money, and that's just not good for anyone in the end, except the ego of the person who won the fight. That's not really helpful, and that's where bankruptcies happen and so on. Not good. Relationships break up, friendships break up. Not good. Within a church, I've seen so many people within church settings, within church committees, beat at each other's throats and kind of, shout down at each other, not over trivialities, over very little minor things. And it's just really sad to see that in a church, in that sort of community setting. But again, it comes from not collaborative truth seeking, not orienting toward the truth, but orienting toward winning, whose name goes up on the pedestal or something like that, or where should we expand the church? Should we expand the church, or should we invest money into, hiring somebody else? So things like this. Yeah, these things tear communities apart. They tear people apart. They tear relationships apart, and they certainly tear our politics apart.
Yeah. There's a good story about that with the Ford Motor Company, and I believe it was about 1950. I want to say 5, 6, 7, right in there. They came out with an Edsel car. Now, Edsel was, I think, the oldest son of Henry Ford. His name was Edsel. So this was going to be the premier Ford car. It had all of the latest gadgets in it, everything. And when you see an Edsel, you'll understand it never sold. And how they ended up building this Edsel, and it was argued against the Edsel by the people in the marketing department. So it says, you're right, but it's a segment of the market that nobody's really buying that right there. And you're trying to introduce too many futuristic new gadgets that people, you have to like introduce this stuff slowly. Well, of course, the name of the car was Edsel, and there was the whole pressure of the family, Ford family, all that. They built it, and they lost their butt on this thing. I don't think they hardly sold any of them. If you can find an Edsel now, it's probably worth a fortune because it was just not that many of them made. But it's a case of, you see, that's another case. God, we're almost at break again. Where if you are always trying to win, you could end up putting your company out of business because you won the argument against your marketing or against your engineering department or against whatever department, and they were right, but you beat them down, and now you lost. You never got anything. You won a campaign, and you lost the war.
Yeah, no, this is what I call winning for the ego. You won for your ego, but you lost the business. You lost what actually is valuable for the community, for money in this case, or for if it was in a community setting or a church setting, you lost trust, you lost credibility, you lost reputation. There's a lot of things that people lose, or in a relationship, you lost your attachment, your sense of emotional connection to your partner or a friend. I mean, I've seen this happen in friendships so many times, where people just kind of start arguing with each other, and again, not connecting emotionally, not looking at each other's emotions and concerns, but trying to win, trying to outcompete, going for social status. And again, like that just leads to really bad outcomes where people aren't oriented toward the truth, but oriented toward winning.
Yeah, it's life is short enough, and to lose really good friendships and relationships and opportunities over an egocentric need to win. But the person probably was raised that way, and I'm not going to, a person, I believe, we're almost to break, has to have a light come on and go, oh, you guys are right. But not to blame them for being such a bully. Maybe that's the way they developed through the, they had to do that to survive, to get anything to eat around the dinner table. Maybe they had to operate that way. Maybe their father was that way. But I think you have to break that cycle. I know it was hard doing with the sales department. I mean, it's really hard when people get dead set that they're right, or that nobody else is right. But I'm gonna have to take another break here, Gleb. And when we get back, I want you to run. You run with what subject you want to talk about. We've got another hour here. I was just bringing this stuff up because I found it interesting. And this is Dwight Lilly with the Dwight Lilly Show. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to The Dwight Lilly Show. Dwight Lilly Show.
It is worldwide.
Hosted by the master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly. Dwight Lilly. Live every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I know. I'm pretty excited about it.
For more information on The Dwight Lilly Show, check out the KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow Dwight on Twitter at Dwight Lilly Show.
Oh, wow.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled intravenous feed of lies until next week.
That was fantastic. Let's do it again.
The Dwight Lilly Show. Dwight Lilly Show.
You're listening to the all-new KCOR, The Core, broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment capital of the world. Hell yeah, in a little place called Area 51.
To turn on the radio. Find the radio, turn it on.
Secretly broadcasting to you from the remote outskirts of the Vegas Valley.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
We've hijacked your daily dose of regurgitated news to bring you the Dwight Lilly Show.
We think it's going to be bigger than American Idol.
Now, the man registered as one of the government's most wanted for speaking only the truth.
He gives good kids bad ideas.
The master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly.
I am talking to you.
Okay, Dwight Lilly back here. Before I go much further, I got to give some sponsors a little plug here. This segment sponsored by Jewelry of Romance at 351 South Frontage Road in Pahrump, Nevada. Phone number 775-751-9636. Also, Stockpile Defense at 3190 South Highway 160. Again in Pahrump. Phone number 775-751-2163. Also, Red Rockin' Tattoos and Apparel at the corner of Sahara and Jones in Las Vegas. Their phone number is 702-969-8255. 954-4080. Again, the corner of Sahara and Jones. And also, I want to remind everybody about the new website I have up that my brand, well, it's not brand new anymore. It's three months old, but it's downtherabbitholemedia.com. That's downtherabbitholemedia.com. I wanted to have down the rabbit hole, but that was already taken. So I added media at the end of it. But anyway, check it out, and at the network there on the, if you're on the website, at the bottom of the front page, there's a donate button down there. And as you know by now, because I keep bringing it up every show, we self-fund our radio shows on the network, and then we help to pay for the airtime, and maybe a cup of coffee off donations. So, like I learned a long time ago, timid salesmen have skinny kids. So you have to ask for the order. So I'm asking you to help out and hit the donate button. Okay, back here with Gleb Tsipursky, and what do you want to talk about?
So I want to get into the question of truth in politics and just why it's important. I think we talk about truth, but we don't necessarily talk about why it's important, so that folks who don't necessarily care so much about the truth don't realize why it's significant. So before they can even get to caring about the truth, we need to get at why it's important to care about the truth. So let's chat about that. And from what I've seen in my research on global historical context is that not caring about the truth leads democracies into corruption and authoritarianism. So we here in America are very privileged that we have relatively low levels of corruption for countries, for democracies, and just globally. I mean, we have some corruption, but relatively low. And we are pretty low levels of authoritarianism. So we're not an authoritarian state. But there have been plenty of democracies that have gone into authoritarian situations and very corrupt situations. An example, very recent example, is actually post-Soviet Russia. So in the early 1990s, after the Soviet Union fell apart, people in post-Soviet Russia were very oriented toward having a liberal democracy. They wanted freedom of speech. They wanted freedom of the press. They really cared about that. Now, when Putin came to power, what he did was he started undermining that. He started attacking the media, criticizing the media. He went on to actually doing more aggressive things toward the media, punishing them with fines, eventually killing journalists. So Russia is notorious for being a country where it's very dangerous to be a journalist. Journalists are killed systematically there. So very dangerous profession in that regard, at least if you criticize the government. And then he took over the media. And then he took over the voting system so that people couldn't vote. And that came because people didn't really care so much about the truth. And I'm really worried about these things happening in the United States. I see people, you and I, Dwight, care about the truth, but there are so many people out there who don't care about what's really true. And they're like, well, whatever, I'll just believe this thing because it sounds good, because it feels true, not because they found the evidence for it. And they don't realize that by just going with their gut reactions, with their intuitions, that they're paving the way toward corruption and authoritarianism, because you know that politicians will stuff their pockets if they can get away with it. And if politicians can get elected by just lying to voters and not being accountable to them, they don't have to care about what voters actually think and represent voters' actual interests. They can just be as corrupt as they want. And they also don't have to give up power eventually if they can just lie to voters and deceive them. So these are huge concerns I have for the future of the United States as I see more and more attacks on the media by politicians, as I see more and more lies by politicians, and less concern about the truth by ordinary people who are just going with their guts as opposed to looking and investigating the evidence. So that's a really big concern of mine, and I'd like to chat about that.
Yeah, when you're talking there about the truth, and you're right, I wonder how many people realize out there, I think I brought it up several times in the past, how fragile our democracy is, the type of government having a republic like this, where we have representatives that we choose, these historically don't last. There seems to be an energy out there. I don't know if it's a flaw in human psyche, a flaw in just the human nature of people getting conned into signing up with a dictator, signing up with some type of an aristocrat, a king or a queen or something that takes advantage of them over and over and over and over again. And there's been revolutions in the past, and the people took back the power, and then somehow it gets, they give it back away. Now, when you were talking about the Soviet Union and Putin coming to power, one of the dangers I could see with Putin, I mean, if people don't realize this about him, then I don't know what to say. Putin was active in the Soviet secret police, the KGB. He is a guy that raised in power in a part of the Soviet apparatus that you're liable to have a bullet put in your head by the people around you. So he is, I guess what I'm saying, he was a young man and he survived and got all the way to the top. And the president he was replacing was a drunk. I mean, I don't know what to say about him. The guy, I don't think I ever saw, I'm trying to be the President Yeltsin. I don't think I ever saw where it didn't look like he was 3 sheets to the wind, drunk. And, not to say he wasn't a good mayor or whatever he'd been, but I mean, it's Gleb, who we choose in this democracy is so critical to where the democracy is going to go. Do we have anybody that's got integrity, that's honest, that cares about the truth, or doesn't sell out? Now, I like to tell the example here in Nevada of Harry Reid, who just now retired he was the Senate majority leader, and he was our senator here for something like 40 years in Nevada. He came to the Senate from being a prosecuting attorney and then working on the gambling board in the state of Nevada, State Gambling Commission. I mean, attorneys make pretty good money. He's worth $40 million plus. Yeah, Gleb, in his career as being a U.S. senator, he was able to earn $40 million. Now, where do you think he got that $40 million at? While you're at Ohio State University, Gleb, do you have, because I see where you're working towards a full tenured professorship, it looks like. You're not going to come out of there if you stay there till you're 80 years old with $40 million.
Oh gosh, no!
No way.
I have like in the low 60s salary. No way. No. So that's definitely not the case. And when you're in the Senate majority, you definitely don't get that sort of salary either. Oh, I totally hear you, and that's very concerning. Kind of where the money goes, and as you said, kind of the authoritarianism is very prevalent in other parts of the world, and people don't realize how precious our democracy is, and they don't realize how easy it is to squander that away. So, people elected authoritarian governments all the time in the past. Democracies have made that mistake, and Putin was elected. People didn't know he would be authoritarian. They would have never elected him if they thought that he would take power in an authoritarian manner. Now, he came from the Russian Secret Service, and that should have given people some hints, but they didn't think that he would adopt these sorts of tactics to killing journalists and so on. Like you said, bullets between the eyes. And it's well known also that opposition figures were murdered under his reign, most likely with his at least implicit knowledge, most likely with explicit knowledge, but I mean, I don't know enough about the situation there to say definitely with explicit knowledge. Most likely he knew that opposition figures were being murdered, journalists were being murdered, and this is something that happened in the past. Germany elected Hitler, and Hitler became an authoritarian tyrant. Italy elected Mussolini. In Spain, Franco won the Civil War, but so there were plenty of people who were elected into power and then kept power and didn't go out of power. Now, can you imagine that in the future, some kind of future president would say in the United States, let's say there's a president and he appoints his own head of the FBI, the attorney general, CIA, and so on. And there's a vote, and the vote goes against the president, and then the president says, oh, well, there was major voter fraud, and he sends his investigator teams from the Justice Department, FBI, and so on, whom he appointed and whom he controls, and they fabricate evidence of there being voter fraud, and they keep that president in power. Now, that's a very reasonable scenario that can very easily happen if people don't actually care about the truth. If we don't have controls over the government, if we don't have media investigating what exactly potentially corrupt government officials are up to, because how else are we going to find out? I'm not going to go into the government office. We pay media journalists to go and look there, and other people who can actually, like you said, alternative media people, perhaps, who can go in there and look what's actually happening and report on these corruptions and abuses of power. And it's a very dangerous road that we're heading down when we're not caring about the truth and we're not focusing on what is the truth and where do we find the evidence, and not putting the reins on the government that are necessary and the checks and balances to prevent this sort of corruption.
I think we're there right now, Gleb, because if you and I wanted to go get a Freedom of Information Act, let's just say we wanted to do it with the Department of Interior or something. Say we were worried about some environmental disaster that was going on in Montana and the threat for even a worse disaster. And so we wanted a Freedom of Information Act request that was getting too close to the truth of why the head of the Billings, Montana office was allowing this to go forward. They could stonewall us to a point where we now have to go hire attorneys to go, and not everybody has the money to hire attorneys. And governments, like one of the problems we're having right here in the state of Nevada, and it might be in Ohio where you're at and other places, is if you want to appeal something, the government will make it so expensive for you to appeal that the average person won't do it. They just don't have the funds, or they'll make it a position where, like the state Supreme Court, we have a very important water case going on, and the guy that filed it, and he's really got his ducks in order, and he's about 80 years old, and he doesn't have the money, and so the state does not want that case to be lost, so they're using the Supreme Court of Nevada to stonewall this guy. He might die before he ever gets, in other words, sending paperwork, making you refile this, everything's expensive. And so our government, I don't think we have an open government right now. And that's scary, to get to the truth. How do you get to the truth if your own so-called republic and democracy is being stonewalled by what I call the professionals? Government is not, like, for instance, Barack Obama is leaving office this week, and so is Joe Biden, and so is all the Loretta Lynch, his whole administration is gone, and a whole new group of people are getting in. But I wonder if they realize as they're coming in that they don't run the government. Who runs the government are the upper management level people in different departments and that have their thumb on everything. If you came in as the Secretary of Education, what would you do? You wouldn't even know where the pencil sharpener's at. And yet you've got this management staff that are so like Trump has said, like I noticed he said he's going to get rid of 20% of the federal employees. And I assume that would mean the management people. And I was reading that today. I thought, is that wise? And my friend over at lunch says, what are you talking about, Dwight? I says, because is he going after just the employees, or is he going after the managers, is who he should probably be focusing on, because he's career politicians, and I've seen it everywhere. You probably seen it at Ohio State University. How do we find out the truth, what really needs to get fixed, as opposed to what the people the lobbyists and everybody, they're going to be fighting for their the law. That's another thing. We need to flush the lobbyists out. There's so much in our democracy that's fragile, but you can see where the problems are. They're right there.
Yeah.
But Gleb, how do you fix it?
Well, there are a number of things that you can do to fix it. So first of all, you were talking about the transparency, and one of the things, I mean, there are a lot of things that Obama did right, or a lot of things that he did wrong. One of the things I appreciate is that he took, I think sometime, I'm looking at the documents right now, in May 6, 2016, he took a number of efforts on financial transparency and anti-corruption. So basically, talking about much greater transparency for business dealings with government. So that I think is very important to maintain,
right,
and not roll back those protections of the citizenry. And that's something I'm quite concerned about Trump rolling those back, because he does want to roll back a number of these protections. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about, that we shouldn't, not everything that the government does is wrong. I think calling for greater transparency in business government dealings is a good thing. So that's kind of one thing that I should think we shouldn't, touch that one. But more broadly, the project, so I'm running a project as part of Intentional Insights and intentionalinsights.org that's called the Post-Lies movement. So getting people from our current post-truth present, so what is the situation right now, into a post-lies future. That's where we want to head. And the aim there, the primary thing that we are first want to do is get people to care about the truth. Because there are far too few people who care about the truth. You and I care about the truth, Dwight. We know that there are lots of sources of evidence where we can go and search. So it's not that there's a lack of evidence out there. If people wanted to find the truth, they can go and they can search and they can investigate and they can use research to figure out what the actual facts of the matter on the ground are. But far too few people care about doing it. They don't realize that not caring about the truth by them and by the whole country as a whole will lead to corruption and authoritarianism. That's what it will lead to. It will be just a downward spiral of deceit and much more corruption, much more authoritarianism than we have right now. And people don't care about the truth nearly enough. So we need to get people to care about the truth. In order to get people to care about the truth, we need to motivate them to care. We need to get them emotionally invested into the truth by pointing out how dangerous it is for everyone, for them to not care about the truth, how it will lead inevitably to corruption and authoritarianism, how it will harm their own political goals to not care about the truth, and how it will lead them to make bad decisions, and it will lead them to be screwed over by politicians who will just lie to them and get them to vote for the politician because the politician lies, not because the politician is actually representing the voters' interests. So it's fundamental to get politicians to actually care about what voters want by getting voters to care about the truth, and so that the politicians wouldn't be lying to them, wouldn't know they can get away with lies. So I think that is the most fundamental thing, to convince people and motivate them and get them emotionally engaged with caring about the truth. And I think we can talk about how to do that, but that's the basic fundamental thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, well, we're coming up on a break again, but one of the things that ties in what you're talking about is the media. And I think about back to the early history of our country and that, how important freedom of the press really was, and how important the scribes were in the different towns. Like when I grew up in Seattle, we had 4 newspapers. 4. Now we've got one owner that has both. There's 2 newspapers left. One of them is hardly even a paper. It's mostly on the internet. And they're owned by some big conglomerate that owns, I think, Gannett or something, that owns a whole bunch of newspapers. But they own and when you look at who they own, they have the paper in Denver, the paper in San Francisco, the paper in Minneapolis, the paper in Columbus, Ohio, the paper, they own all these newspapers, and they have the editorial, anyway. So the media, and then another phenomena that's come up, we get into, is this whole idea of the fake news that's coming out. Fake news. In other words, when you talk about truth, you can't find the truth anymore. And it was originally designed, I think they called it the fifth estate or fifth estate or something, was that the media was supposed to, in a sense, has a responsibility to do oversight, even over, we have separations of power, but the media was even supposed to kind of referee and make sure that was going right.
Indeed.
And they're not doing their job. They're sold out. They've sold out. They're corrupt. You know, the media has become corrupted by the power and everything. And anyway, we're going to be right back for the final half hour here with Gleb Tsipursky, and this is Dwight Lilly, the Dwight Lilly Show. Stay tuned. We got some more coming your way.
You're listening to the Dwight Lilly Show. Dwight Lilly Show.
It is worldwide.
Where the truth survives and the lies are exposed.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Number one with a bullet.
I think that people are gonna like this.
More with the master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly. Dwight Lilly. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network after this short break.
We interrupt to bring you this.
Would you like to advertise on KCOR Digital Radio Network?
This is what I'm talking about.
At a fraction of the cost of traditional radio advertising, why not?
Tell them the good news.
Whether you need to promote your next book, product, or service, we can customize a package for just about any budget.
Finally, there is hope for the hopeless.
Why limit yourself to a tiny local market when KCOR can brand you to the world?
Here's all you do.
Visit KCORradio.com or contact our sales department by email at saleskcorradio.com.
We want it now!
See the difference with us by letting us work for you.
This ain't reality TV!
The KCOR Digital Radio Network.
1 million miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint, and the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1 million miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1 million miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1 million miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com and GlenNT.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
You're listening to the all-new KCOR, The Core, broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment capital of the world. Hell yeah, in a little place called Area 51.
Bowl for Life is a non-profit organization founded in 2013 by Chuck Gardner with one simple goal: to grow the sport of bowling worldwide. Over the years, Bowl for Life has given out thousands of dollars in scholarships to youth bowlers around the world. Our focus is to nurture integrity, honesty, professionalism, as well as respect into bowlers both young and old. You can help us by going to bowlforlife.com. Even the smallest donation goes a long way to breaking down the barriers and helping us assist people of all ages to improve their skills as well as knowledge of the game. Bowl for Life is happy to be partnered with other great organizations like the Youth Education Services Fund, as well as the United States Bowling Congress, with many spectacular integrated events planned in the near future. To learn more, go to bowlforlife.com. That's bowlforlife.com.
Receiving transmission. Commence radio program sequence. Channel check.
Left channel. Frequency check. Frequency Frequency check complete. All frequencies clear.
The KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number is open at 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Oh, sweet.
Tweet your comments anytime to KCOR using the hashtag KCOR. Join the conversation live and share your thoughts of the show in our chat room at www.kcorradio.com.
It's as simple as that.
Now, back to your constitutional freedom fighter.
Now you're putting the whole station in jeopardy.
The master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly.
Dwight Lilly.
Okay, Dwight Lilly back here with Gleb Tsipursky. You know, this show, I guess the title of this show should be The Truth. A show about the truth. And as all my listeners know out there, I started from the very first show. I'm going to say it again in this segment. I've always told you, don't believe anything but your own research. I bring you information, but I would never intentionally mislead you. And you guys have followed me around here now into my second year as I've been exploring all these different questions I bring up in these shows. And I always tell you, heck, I'm still looking, I'm still researching, and I could be giving a completely different take on something. But I didn't do it to fool you. I wasn't trying to con you. What I had as the facts that I thought I had the fact. Maybe they're a little bit different. But but it's important when we started to talk before we went to the break, we're going to talk about that a little bit now, is the responsibility of the media, people that write books, people that produce TV programs and movies and that, and documentaries. A documentary, how powerful a documentary is. You take it for granted that scientist on there is telling you the truth. And if you found out that, well, he's a fake, he's a scientist, but he's also being paid by Exxon or Boeing or some big corporations where he's getting his funding at his university, and they won't give him the funding unless he taints it their way. This is going on out there, isn't it, Gleb?
It is absolutely going on. And I think what you said before the break about the consolidation of the media is something to really pay a lot of attention to. The consolidation of the media ownership, where we have less independent voices in the media, is alarming. And that's why it's beneficial that we have a number of good websites popping up with alternative media sources that provide more information and richer information. But we have to be very careful when looking at these websites because a number of them are not credible, not trustworthy. They're not run according to journalistic code of ethics and norms, which is oriented toward trying to be as objective as possible, not always succeeding. But that's the code of ethics and norms for journalists. So when we look at the media, we need to, oh gosh, you were talking about fake news, and that's such a big problem right now. I saw a study from Stanford University, just recently came out, that students, they talk to students, high school and college students, and about 80% of the study participants couldn't differentiate between Facebook-sponsored ads and stories shared by their friends. Now, for your listeners who don't know much about Facebook, sponsored ads are advertisements. So that's advertisements shown to you by Facebook. And there's a clear indication, a yellow sign that says this is an advertisement. And other stories are stories shared by friends. And 80% of savvy social media users, so college students, couldn't differentiate between an advertisement and an actual news story. Now, what about kind of less savvy social media users, which most older people tend to be by comparison to college and high school students? Even less of them can tell apart the difference. Now, college and high school students were making ridiculous evaluations of the credibility of a news story. For example, many people judged a news story as more credible, more trustworthy, more true if it had a nice big photo image associated with it, as opposed to the source of the news media story. So they were looking at the size of the image as an indicator of the credibility of the story, as opposed to the actual credibility, which relies on the reputation of the venue that produced the story and the quality of the content of the story. So we're living in scary times, Dwight, where folks are just don't really care nearly as much about the truth as they should, and they get deceived by these fake news stories. And this is very concerning and very scary because that's what will lead us down the road to corruption and authoritarianism if folks don't orient toward avoiding sharing fake news stories and in general caring about the truth.
Yeah, it's really bad. I'll throw something out there right now. If you go to because I have one of my email addresses as an old Yahoo email address. So I go there periodically because one of the groups I use for that email, I have to check the email every now and then. But on you'll be reading these articles. I think, oh, let's see, it's an article on the Ohio State Buckeye football team. That's where you're at. Let me read this. Then I'll look. Oh my God, here's an article about new Martians found something, or what's Brad Pitt and the truth between Brad Pitt and Angela Jolie or something like that, which I don't care about, but that's an example. And then you'll look at the top and it'll say sponsored.
And people very often mistake something that they're comfortable with for something that's true. That's a fundamental mistake that our brains make. So the more often something is repeated, that's the principle by which advertisement works. The more we believe it, and that's just a failure of the human mind. So an easy trick to work against that is to notice when something is repeated without additional evidence being provided for it. So, I can go and cite a number of studies and provide evidence for the illusory true effect, and I do that in writings on my website and so on if people want to check it out. But the point is that there are ways to learn these tricks that politicians and advertisers, salespeople play on us, and learn to defend ourselves against these tricks, against these manipulations, against these attempts to screw with our minds, by learning and catching them and resisting them.
What is an example? Give an example of because I know the famous book. I remember this in college, and it was on subliminal messaging. And the most famous story, I guess you'd have to say, would be you'd go to a movie theater, and this really happened, and they would put a pitcher of buttered popcorn and an ice cold Coke, I think it was, and they would intersperse the frames like what. You'd only see that just for one frame. And I think movies are like, I'm just going to say 35 frames a second or something, whatever. There's a figure for it. And so your brain saw that. I guess you'd have to say something saw it, but you aren't consciously aware that you saw it. And after that thing flipped on there enough times, you turned to your wife or your boyfriend or, whatever, and said, I'm going to go up and get some popcorn and a Coke. Mm-hmm. And they sold it. They sold a lot because they were conning people through subliminal advertising to do that. And then in the same book, because I took a class in this, it showed a bottle of vodka. And you know how it's a chilled bottle of vodka with the water draining down the side of it? And then it showed a naked woman outlined. You had to look at it to see it, but it was the way the shading was from the way the water was going down the drips were going down. And so people's brain would pick up that image. Mm-hmm. I guess that it would be sexy to drink this type of vodka or something like that. Just all sorts of really diabolical ways that we get conned all the time. Mm-hmm. And how about something like tricky dick? Terms like or a term where they call somebody something enough times, people say, he's just a crook. What do you mean he's a crook? How do you have evidence he's a crook? Has he ever been convicted of a felony? Has he ever, the income tax? Well, no, he's crooked. Everybody knows he's crooked. Well, how do you know? Well, look at it. Gleb, look at his name. His name is Dishonest Joe. I mean, how could you know what I mean? And you just created an image of that person.
Yes. So that's a really good point. That's another psychological phenomenon called the horns and halo effect. So the horns and halo effect refer to when we have a negative or a positive association with someone, a certain aspect of someone, we extend that to the whole person. For example, if we see a tall person, a tall guy, we tend to think that the guy is a good leader and that he is courageous and macho. He might not be any of those, but that's just an association that we have with tall people. And like, what does, when we actually think about it, like, what does being tall have to do with courage? Nothing, absolutely nothing. But that's how our brain is structured. That's the halo effect. So it creates a positive image of someone just because of a certain positive characteristic that person possesses. Or let's say we look at somebody and that person is unattractive to us for some reason, unattractive guy or unattractive woman. The person's other attributes tend to drop in our minds. So there's been quite a bit of research that unattractive men and unattractive women who possess the same qualifications are much less likely to be hired in job interviews and elected for political office and so on. So, they have the same qualifications. It's just their level of physical appearance, which has nothing to do with the job that they would actually be doing. They would say, let's say, an accountant or something like that.
You're absolutely right. In fact, in a classroom, there's been studies that the tall boys, good-looking girls got better grades than everybody else.
Yes.
I mean,
not because they were, smarter or better. Yeah, just because they had made a better impression on the teacher. Absolutely.
And so then you start off in school and you're in high school or junior high school, middle school, and that's when you first start getting into the student body president, people running for office and stuff. I remember that back in there. Mm-hmm. And it's the tall, good-looking quarterback of the school football team and the cheerleading queen are the two that get elected to the office. Now, we could end up having two bimbos in there that don't even know what they're doing, and they both got elected to the political office based upon their looks.
Absolutely.
And if you notice, if you look into politics, look how tall these politicians are. I think Donald Trump's 6'4" or something like that. Maybe 6'5". He's really a tall guy. And you notice you don't see the short little guys. It's always these big, robust, good-looking guys, that are going to get. In fact, in the debate, remember the debate that Hillary Clinton demanded that the podiums, there was something changed on a podium that she had because she felt she was being overshadowed by the side. I don't know how tall she is. Maybe she's 5'5", or I don't know how tall Clinton is. I don't like her for other reasons. I didn't think she was an honest person, but anyway, Trump is an imposing figure, on the stage. I mean, he is an imposing figure. And in people's minds, they would be reading that subconsciously, and
they would be associating him with leadership. So this is kind of these are the associations. I think you're absolutely right, Dwight, that people draw. And one thing that I recommend to in business contexts, when I talk to people about hiring, firing, business collaborations, what to do is when they go to an interview, they should give people negative points for having things like height or attraction or so on, because those people likely got to where they are, not so much because of their qualifications, but because, or it was a combination of their qualifications and their physical appearance, and their physical appearance likely boosted their career track. Therefore, their abilities are likely less than the abilities of people who aren't as tall or aren't as pretty, and so on. So this is a common advice I give to my clients in HR perspectives and business leaders, because otherwise, you will end up working with someone who got to where they are, not because of how good they are, not because of how skilled they are, but just because of halo effect or horns effect. So these are important things to keep in mind. The same thing for politicians. Give them negative credit for being tall because they got to where they are, not because of their skills in their trade, whatever they do, but in part, at least, due to their height, due to their physical impressiveness. And that's something to discount for in order to make wise decisions and see the actual truth of reality as it is.
Yeah, we had, when I was going to school, we had back in the old days, back when we still had horse and buggies running around, we had an image consultant come in, one of the classes, taught a class. And let me give you an example. If you had a mustache, there was a certain percentage of people that didn't trust you. If you had a beard, it was even more of an image. More people subconsciously didn't trust you. If you had long hair, the same thing. There was all of these parts where he was teaching us, listen, if you want to be successful, you may like that long hair of yours, you might like that beard, but I want you to know up front, it's going to cost you in, if it's sales or if it's in people, deciding to go with your company, whatever, you are going to lose people and you don't know why you lost them. Well, it could be a percentage of it's because of how you appeared to them. And so I think a good trick, not a trick, a tool to have would be if you're debating somebody that, for like say you were running for office, to bring up that fact and say, you know what, Joe Blow over here, you see how much taller he is than I am? You notice I'm bald and he's still got all that hair, that nice wavy, and that Hollywood smile he's got. Now think about it. Does that make him a better judge of, blah, blah, blah? Are you leaning towards him because of how he looks? And I'm kind of an ugly looking guy. And they'd probably start laughing at that part. But I know you'd probably just, you know what, Gleb, I bet you would disarm some of it because people would think about, geez, I didn't think about that. I was going to vote for her because, geez, she looks like Marilyn Monroe, Why wouldn't I vote for her?
Yeah, that's a good call. I'd actually use the tactic that I talked about before to say that, hey, look, this guy, he looks really attractive and he's tall and he's macho. Well, you know what? Research shows that people who they have that competitive advantage and they get to their position just because they're tall and macho, he's actually less skilled than you think he is. If he was more skilled than he currently is, he'd be much higher than he is right now. So he's not nearly as skilled as he appears. It's just his tallness and his height and his attractiveness, whatever, that gets him to where he is. And this is one of those tricks that we have to basically address our brain. And it all goes back to how our brain works and this connection between our sense of comfort and truth. I think it's going to be so important. If the only thing that I do with my life is convey to people in the United States that truth is not the same thing as comfort. Comfort and truth are two different things. Notice when you're feeling comfortable with something and question whether it's actually true, especially if it's something that it's tempting financially for you to believe, or if it goes along with your ideological inclinations. It's very dangerous.
Forget, yeah, but Gleb, you're kind of a shifty-eyed guy now. You've got to be careful. Hey, what is your website? How tell people how they can find this information. If it's a company listening out there, how can they connect with you guys? And this is important information.
Sure. So my personal website is glebtsipursky.com, glebtsipursky.com, and that's where people can find the article on collaborative truth seeking, for example, which is up there right now. The Intentional Insights website, and for people who do want to do business with me, consulting and so on, that's the website. For Intentional Insights and for stuff on rational politics, how we actually can fix America and not let it slide down to corruption and deceit and authoritarianism, check out intentionalinsights.org. That's the organization I run. So again, intentionalinsights.org. And my personal email is gleb@intentionalinsights.org. And you could just Google me, Gleb Tsipursky. I'll be happy to chat to any guests of your show. Just mention that you heard me on the Dwight Lilly show.
Yeah, and make sure that people out there that this show can be heard in archives. About 12 hours from now, this will be up on the website for KCOR radio. That's KCORradio.com. So anybody that wants to listen to this show into the future, I've got an archive there. So free. No, I'm not charging you for it or anything. So spread the word around about Gleb being on the show. Gleb, if you want to put this on your website, this show, go ahead. You know, it's free. You just owe me a cup of coffee one of these days or something, you know.
Sure.
And but I'm really glad that you came on the show tonight. Again, I knew this was going to be a good show. But
yeah, this was great. Thank you, Dwight.
Yeah. And I've got to go until next Tuesday, folks. This is Dwight Lilly with the Dwight Lilly Show with Gleb Tsipursky, my special guest.
You've been listening to the Dwight Lilly Show. Dwight Lilly Show.
It is worldwide.
Hosted by the master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly. Dwight Lilly. Live every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I know. I'm pretty excited about it.
For more information on the Dwight Lilly Show, check out the KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow Dwight on Twitter at Dwight Lilly Show.
Oh, wow.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled intravenous feed of lies until next week.
That was fantastic. Let's do it again.
The Dwight Lilly Show. Dwight Lilly Show.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network. Broadcast